What if the world's most powerful nation, armed with unmatched wealth, global influence, and military might, is unknowingly following the same path that led another empire to collapse just a century ago? What if the United States today is standing exactly where the British Empire once stood in its final, glorious, and doomed days? That's not an exaggeration. It's a pattern. History doesn't repeat itself perfectly, but it rhymes, and the rhyme between the fall of the British Empire and the current trajectory of the United States is becoming harder to ignore. Let's start with a mystery. How does a global superpower, at the height of its dominance, lose control? Not to an invader, not to a single catastrophic event, but to a slow, invisible decay that everyone saw coming but no one stopped? To answer that, we need to look backward before we look forward, because the seeds of every empire's fall are planted in its rise. At the dawn of the 19th century, Britain was unstoppable. The Industrial Revolution had turned a small island nation into the factory of the world. Steam engines powered ships that carried goods across the oceans, and the British pound became the currency of global trade. The sun, quite literally, never set on the British Empire. From India to Africa to the Caribbean, Britain's navy and commerce stretched across the planet. It was a self-sustaining machine. Colonies provided raw materials, British factories turned them into products, and those products flooded colonial markets. Profits flowed back to London, enriching bankers, industrialists, and politicians alike. Britain's power rested on two foundations: its economic dominance and its control of the seas. But here's where the first cracks appeared. Cracks that would look eerily familiar today. The same industrial strength that made Britain rich also made it overconfident. With wealth came inequality, with power came complacency, and with global reach came overextension. By the early 20th century, Britain was not just a manufacturer, it was a creditor. London financed railways in Argentina, mines in Africa, and ports in Asia. The empire's economy depended less on making things and more on moving money. That shift, from production to finance, was a turning point. Fast forward to today. The United States, too, rose on the back of industrial might. After World War II, American factories produced half the world's goods. The dollar replaced the pound as the global reserve currency. The US military became the new British Navy, a force capable of projecting power anywhere on Earth. And like Britain, America began to believe that this dominance would last forever. But over time, the US economy followed the same arc, from manufacturing powerhouse to financial empire. By the 1980s, Wall Street, not Detroit, was the symbol of American success. Just as London once was for Britain. When finance replaces industry, profits grow, but resilience fades. The economy becomes a web of speculation rather than creation. It's the illusion of strength without the foundation to support it. Let's rewind to Britain again, because this is where the story accelerates toward its breaking point. In 1914, Britain entered World War I as the world's richest nation. 4 years later, it emerged drowning in debt. The war cost Britain nearly £35 billion, a staggering figure for the time. And much of it was borrowed from its own rising rival, the United States. The empire had gone from lender to borrower. The 1920s brought a temporary illusion of recovery. London's elite still dressed in fine suits, its colonies still stretched across the map, and the pound was repegged to gold to project confidence. But beneath the surface, the empire was brittle. Industrial output was stagnating, labor strikes were spreading, and nationalist movements in India, Egypt, and Ireland were growing louder. Then came 1929. The Great Depression exposed the fragility of Britain's system. Unemployment soared, trade collapsed, and the government slashed spending to defend its currency. The more it tried to preserve its image as a global leader, the weaker it became. Sound familiar? The United States hit its own inflection point decades later. The Vietnam War in the 1960s drained the treasury, much like World War I had done for Britain. By 1971, America could no longer afford to keep the dollar tied to gold. So President Nixon ended the gold standard, just as Britain had abandoned it decades earlier. From then on, the dollar was backed not by gold, but by faith in US power. That faith held for decades. The Cold War cemented America's global dominance. just as the British Empire had been solidified by its colonies. But while the British Empire was slowly losing its industrial base to rivals like Germany and the United States, America was outsourcing its factories to Japan, China, and Mexico. The logic was the same: let others make the goods while we manage the money. By the early 2000s, finance once again overshadowed production. The top US banks controlled assets worth trillions, while manufacturing jobs vanished by the millions. Meanwhile, America's military presence expanded to over 70 countries. Like Britain in the 19th century, the US became both wealthy and overextended. Its influence spread thin across the globe. Every empire reaches a breaking point. For Britain, it came during World War II. The war bankrupted the empire for good. In 1945, Britain owed more money to the US than it could ever repay. Within 2 decades, nearly every major colony had gained independence. The pound lost its global dominance, and the world's power center shifted across the Atlantic. What's often forgotten is how quietly it happened. Britain didn't collapse in flames, it faded. One day it was a global empire. The next it was just another nation with nostalgia for its past. The transition was slow enough that most people didn't realize it until it was over. The US is now at a similar crossroads. Its global leadership is still real, but it's eroding in ways that feel invisible day to day. The dollar still dominates, but its share of global reserves has fallen from over 70% in 2000 to under 60% today. Its military is still unmatched, but wars in Iraq and Afghanistan cost over $8 trillion and eroded both finances and trust. At home, inequality mirrors Britain's late imperial days. In 1900, Britain's top 1% owned about 70% of the wealth. Today in America, the top 1% owns roughly 60%. Infrastructure is aging. Political division runs deep, and like Britain, America's greatest rival, China, is rising by following the very model America once used: industrial growth fueled by exports and investment. The fallout of imperial decline always follows a pattern. First comes denial, an insistence that everything is fine, that decline is just an illusion. Then come the symbolic gestures, massive defense budgets, patriotic speeches, and calls to restore greatness. Britain had them, America has them. Then come the failed fixes. Britain tried to hold on to global influence through the Commonwealth and military commitments it could no longer afford. The US has tried quantitative easing, stimulus checks, and near-zero interest rates to keep the economy afloat. Tools that work for a while, but deepen long-term weakness. By the time the British pound lost its status as the world's reserve currency, the empire had already hollowed out from within. By the time the US dollar faces serious challenge, the same may be true. There's a chilling statistic. In the final decades of Britain's empire, its national debt exceeded 200% of GDP. Today, US debt has crossed 120% and rising. History suggests that once empires pass this threshold, they rarely recover without transformation. But decline is not destiny. That's the twist history offers us. Britain's empire fell, but Britain itself survived, smaller, humbler, but stable. The US could do the same if it recognizes the pattern and adapts before it's too late. So what can we learn from all this? 3 takeaways stand out. First, empires fall not from external conquest, but from internal decay. The British Empire wasn't destroyed by Germany or Japan. It collapsed under the weight of debt, inequality, and overreach. America faces the same internal pressures. Second, the shift from production to finance is a warning sign, not a victory lap. Every time a nation stops making things and starts relying on financial speculation to sustain its wealth, it trades short-term profits for long-term decline. And third, global dominance is temporary. The British believed the world needed them. The US believes the same today, but the world adapts, power diffuses, influence shifts. It always does. The question is not whether the US will lose its empire, it's what will replace it. Will it be a multipolar world where power is shared among nations like China, India, and the European Union? Or will a new kind of empire, digital, corporate, and decentralized, rise in its place? The end of an empire is not the end of the world. It's a moment of transformation. The British Empire's decline paved the way for modern democracy, international cooperation, and technological innovation. The US could lead a similar reinvention if it chooses reflection over denial. History gives warnings, not prophecies. And the warning is clear. If America continues to repeat the same economic and political patterns that doomed Britain, unchecked debt, financialization, endless wars, and widening inequality, then the outcome will rhyme in familiar, tragic ways. But if it learns from the past, it can break the pattern. So the next time someone says that the US is too big to fail, remember that people once said the same about the British Empire. The real question isn't whether decline is possible. It's whether anyone will notice it happening before it's complete. If you found this story thought-provoking, subscribe. Because the fate of every empire begins in the stories its people tell and the lessons they choose to ignore.